Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gen.ai Meetup Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Shashank, and I have Mark with me. Actually, not with me. He is very far away in Canada, trying to drive up to the northernmost part of North America to take a dip in the Arctic Ocean. But today we have a lot of exciting news. It's been a big week for announcements. We've got another big, massive state-of-the-art model from Anthropic with the Opus 4.1 release. We've got open source models from OpenAI. Finally, 5 years after their last open source release with the GPT-2, they have now introduced GPT-OSS with a big flavor and a tiny flavor that you can run on your consumer-grade laptop. And we'll talk about a couple fun ways to run this with Ollama. We've got Gemini's DeepThink, which is able to solve really challenging math problems and come up with like really innovative solutions that would be hard for a regular mathematician to do. And really exciting, I don't know what to call this. They call it a world model, but I think of it as a fusion of a video generation model and a game engine, where you can control a character moving through a simulated environment. So exciting news. What do you think, Mark? Where do you want to start?
There's a lot to talk about. Let's start with what you mentioned first, the new Claude model. So Claude 4.1. I think it's worth talking about because it's new, although it seems to be very incremental from their previous model. So the previous state-of-the-art model was the Claude Opus 4 model, and this is now 4.1. So it seems like it's just slightly better on pretty much all the benchmarks across the board. So like, for example, Claude Opus scored 72.5 on the agentic coding SWE bench, and Claude Opus 4.1 was not a 72.5, but a 74.5. So just a little bit better. And you can kind of follow this pattern down the line where a lot of things are just like, a couple percentage better. But hey, I'll take it. It's improvement. And I'm happy that Anthropic is actually releasing this as opposed to sitting on it, because I am actually a fan of giving us smaller incremental updates as opposed to waiting 2 years and then just giving us like Opus 5 and some sort of big bang release. It's like, now we can just keep on getting the latest and greatest as they have it ready.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the only reason why this is even worth mentioning is because Anthropic is the biggest provider of LLMs in enterprise space. I think there were some numbers floating around, 33%, followed by either Gemini or OpenAI, which are trailing behind at like 25 something. People love it. It's the best at coding. It's the whole reason Cursor exists at a company. Cursor, which is the IDE, the software development environment. It kicked off this whole era of vibe coding. They introduced Claude Code, which was the best, and I think it still is the best CLI provided by an LLM, which allows you to talk to it in a terminal and have it do things in your software project. It's really good at multi-file edits. So this is really important as your project keeps getting bigger. So I've vibe coded a bunch of different things in the past few months and years, and I think it's only good for toy projects, weekend hackathons, and something that you just want to play around with to get a feel for an idea. Anything beyond that, and vibe coding just like falls apart. The LLMs can't understand the context beyond like a handful of files. And Mark and I were just having this discussion about another side project that he's working on, where it's a tricky problem to provide the right amount of context to an LLM and have it modify things across multiple files. So Reportedly, Anthropic is better at it now, and that's good news for everyone.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to try this out because I tried Claude Code before on the Opus model, and I found that one, it cost a fortune because it was using a ton of tokens really quickly, and I was having a really hard time trying to figure out exactly which files that the LLM should go and use as its context. So right now, my project that I'm working on is getting a little bit large, and I think it was too much for the LLM to handle. So oftentimes it would make too big of changes. It would make changes in files that I didn't want. It would refactor things. It would delete methods unnecessarily. So I couldn't find that it was useful for me. And I also ran into similar issues with OpenAI's model. So right now, my workflow is literally I will just have a text file where I will paste my have like a starter prompt, and then I have some documentation that I wrote about the software, and then I'll just paste in the relevant files, and I'll just paste all of that into an LLM and just kind of handcraft the prompt as opposed to relying on one of these tools. And that for me tends to work a little bit better. I really don't like that workflow because it feels inefficient, right? I've tried Claude Code, I've tried the OpenAI, I forget what it's called, like OpenAI Code or something. I've tried Aider, which is another one. I've tried Cursor.
I think Aider renamed to Augment Code, which is a great company, by the way, focused on
okay.
enterprise. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've tried a lot of these different things, and I just haven't been able to get it like optimized, and I feel like there's a better way. So if anybody has, if anybody's figured it out, let us know in the comments, because I'm really trying to optimize this development process. And me going into a text file and modifying the prompt by hand, and then just like go into the Grok UI and then pasting it in. I mean, it works. It's actually fairly efficient, but it feels like it could be more efficient, So anyways, I don't know exactly how much time I want to spend like toying with my environment versus actually building. But anyways, Claude Opus 4.1, exciting stuff. But yeah, so that's exciting. And if you want to use it, it's available in a lot of different places. So you can use it via their API. You can use it on the Anthropic website. And then like if you also want, it's available on Amazon's Bedrock. So Bedrock is a tool made by Amazon that hosts a bunch of different models. Amazon has given Anthropic a lot of money, so if you'd like to use it, you can use it there, or you could use it on Google Cloud's Vertex AI. So lots of options for using Anthropic's model. Very exciting. And do you know what else is exciting, Shashank? Is new open source models from OpenAI.
Yeah, that's a wild one. I think this has been a long time coming. They've been getting a lot of flack for being called open AI, and I'm doing air quotes as I say that, and not having released anything open source in a long time. They might have done some embedding model or something, but really nothing significant since GPT-2, which I don't even know if it's worth using that anywhere today. It's such an old, outmoded model that I think the only use case for GPT-2 would be as an educational exercise to learn how to build a GPT from scratch. But this is exciting. They announce 2 flavors. They call it GPT-OSS, open source software, I presume. A 120 billion parameter one and another 20 billion parameter one. So the tiny one can run on the latest MacBooks, which have like 16 gigabytes of memory. Apple has been pushing the RAM capacity of the MacBooks to support their new Apple Intelligence, which again has no ETA in sight. But this tiny model can run on a consumer grade laptop, and the benchmarks are very, very impressive. So for those of you on video, I'm screen sharing and looking at like the charts for software benchmarks, and like general intelligence benchmarks for the humanities last exam. And for that one, the big open source model from OpenAI is comparable with like O3 or O4. And it's a very nuanced thing, like these scores, because you can measure.
Yeah. So for reference, O3 is OpenAI's current state-of-the-art reasoning model, and then O4 is their reasoning model that is slightly smaller. So it's a little bit worse. Weirdly, O4 is actually slightly worse than O3 because it's actually O4 mini. But anyways,
yeah,
go ahead.
The whole naming scheme is such a mess. They've admitted that publicly. Like they started with ChatGPT 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 4, and then they were like O4, which was supposed to be like multimodal. Then they were like, sorry, not O4, 4.0. 4.0 was the multimodal one. O3, they skipped one because of trademark licensing issues with the O2, the telecom provider. Then they went with like O3, O4 for reasoning capabilities. And like as a consumer, I don't think anyone cares about this. They're just like, just give me the model that just do the stuff for me. Why do I have to worry about all this naming scheme, and why do I need to do mental math to figure out what to use? Which kind of brings me to this whole routing problem. You know, when we started this meetup, one of the early presenters was from Martian Router. Do you remember those guys? I thought they were going to be, I thought they were going to be really cool. They were going to be a routing platform for user requests, and then they handle the routing to the right model depending on the task. So, you know, if you have a really complicated research paper that you're trying to write, then fine, give it to the biggest, beefiest reasoning model. If you have like a simple question, maybe give it to the tiny model. But now I think users are having to do a lot of this logistics planning on their own, and it's not that easy to understand for a non-tech person. But anyway, this is all to say that this new open source model is really, really good. It's on par with one of their best reasoning models, or the previous generation of their best reasoning models. And it's cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, I have to give a minor round of applause to OpenAI for actually releasing something good, and not just providing lip service to the open source community, because this is cool. Like, it is available on a lot of different places. You can run it on Ollama. You can run it. I think Cerebras has it. I mean, you could run it on your own hardware. It's there. You can use it, and it's actually like pretty decent. Is it as good as the proprietary models? No, it's not. But it's within spitting distance of a lot of the proprietary models, and it actually is better than a lot of the other proprietary models. So I think this is great. I applaud it, and I understand that OpenAI wants to keep their proprietary models the best, because people still they still need to have a reason to charge people, right? And if they just give away their best things for free, it's going to be tough for them to make money, and they have lots of investors. So this will be something that is for the community, and that people can use for your project, and you don't have and you can run on your own hardware, and you can actually be sure that you'll be able to have it 20 years from now, and then it's not going to change, because you can just download the binary and you can just keep running on your computer. And I think that is fantastic. And I see, Shashank, you're sharing your screen about raising a little bit of money.
Yeah, just a little bit. The Sam Altman was trying to raise $40 billion. I don't know how much of this is actually true and how much of it is a rumor. I saw the number 8 billion floating around somewhere, but potentially $40 billion. And I think the valuation was like 300 billion. So $300 billion for a startup is just mind-boggling. This would make it the biggest private company, I think. And some of the massive FANG companies are worth in the trillions. We only recently hit a few years ago a $1 trillion market cap, and this thing is, at least on paper, worth 300 billion. But again, it is a startup. It is a small, maybe not small. They have like 3,000 people now. But it's a company that solely relies on their LLMs to generate revenue, as opposed to, the obvious company that comes to mind is like Meta, which released the Llama models for free for the last 4 generations. And I think their strategy was to benefit from all of the changes that everyone else makes on top of their open source models. And all of the chip builders, designers, the hardware that grows around this ecosystem is taking into account the Llama models because it's become so popular. Now we have a lot of other competitors. We have a lot of open source models from all the big companies. Microsoft has their Phi models. Google has their Gemma models. We have a lot of Chinese competitors. Alibaba has their Qwen. DeepSeek, with the big tiny research firm, came out with their model. So now it's a lot more diverse. But back when Meta released their first model, it was the best. It was the best open source model, and they benefited a lot from it, I think. With OpenAI releasing an open source model now, I don't know how much they're going to benefit from it, apart from the PR outlook. I think it's going to make them look better in front of the media. But I don't know how much they're going to benefit from the open source ecosystem building on top of their model, making it better, and benefiting from like other synergistic things.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of points I want to have here. First, I want to potentially try to defend OpenAI's $300 billion valuation. Now, I know it's high, and it may be overvalued, but I think it's not completely unreasonable. For one, I think that ChatGPT is the de facto LLM that people use for everything, right? When people are using Anthropic, when people are using Microsoft's Copilot, when people are using whatever, Gemini, people still call it ChatGPT, right? Like, it's the Kleenex of LLMs, right?
It's the Google.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
Even if people use Bing, they still say Google it, right? Yeah. And I think that ChatGPT has come into the name. So I think that is worth a lot of money. And then, like, if we can compare it, the potential of where OpenAI is going to some of these other bigger companies, like, I think that the valuation isn't necessarily completely off. So for reference, right, NVIDIA and Microsoft, I believe, just both hit $4 trillion. Apple is like a $3 trillion company. Amazon is, I think, like $2 trillion, something like that. So a lot of these companies are in the multi-trillions of dollars. So being worth only, like 8% of NVIDIA for being the predominant LLM, whereas NVIDIA, with all the AI hype, got up to a $4 trillion market cap. OpenAI, which is actually like the company that's like realistically building the hype, right? I mean, like, NVIDIA is kind of selling the shovels, metaphorically, for the AI companies, right? NVIDIA is designing the hardware, which they don't even build, right? Like, NVIDIA only designs the hardware, which TSMC makes, and then once they have that hardware, then OpenAI uses to run. So, like, NVIDIA, because of a lot of this AI hype, got a $4 trillion valuation, and now OpenAI is less than 10% of that valuation. So I don't know. I feel like 10% of NVIDIA is not completely unrealistic for a startup that is growing this fast with this many users.
I agree. I'm not saying it's overvalued. I'm just saying it's a big company, and they have one product. So they need to make sure that one product is making money, and they can't afford to subsidize the cost of their LLM with like, ad revenue like these other FANG companies are doing. But I tried to run this model on my laptop, and it's gave me a warning. I used LM Studio, which is like a GUI based app with like a UI similar to any of these LLM interfaces with a chat window. But it complained that your system resources would be overloaded if you load this model, and like your video momentarily started stuttering before I shut it down. But another way to run it would be Ollama. I haven't tried that. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, so before we get to Ollama, I want to talk a little bit more about OpenAI's going to open source. So I think that OpenAI, Sam Altman is really trying to go the Mark Zuckerberg route here, where because the Llama model was open source, we saw a lot of companies and people building off of it just because it was the best open source model that you could get, right? So, for example, Sentient AI, who we had on the podcast a few months ago, they built their entire LLM as a fork of Llama because it was one of the best open source models you can get. And now I think that because they are going to release arguably the best open source model out there, right? I mean, it's debatable, right? I mean, some people may say DeepSeek is the best. Some people may say Llama is the best. Some people may say Quen is the best. I don't know, but it's definitely state of the art. And I think this is going to make it so that a lot of people will use it and make add-ons to it, build infrastructure for it, integrate with it. And if OpenAI didn't have this, they would be missing all of that free development work and just like the developer goodwill. So I think that it is good that they're building something like this for the open source community, but I think that they are not doing this just purely out of the goodness of their heart. I think they're going to be getting a lot of benefit of free developer work for people leveraging this, and that will just further ingrain their, I'm not going to say monopoly, but like it will further ingrain like I guess I would say like it would further establish their dominance and make it so that people just won't easily switch. So like a lot of people were thinking about switching to Meta, but they may just not switch now because that open source model exists.
Yeah, and just to note, this is a cool model, but it's not like the end-all be-all open source model to use, because it does do reasoning, but it doesn't have chain of thought. Sorry, it doesn't have a multimodal. So you can't give it images, video, audio, and have it understand it. But it does reason. It can think about it, think about a complex problem, go search the web, use a bunch of tools to solve whatever you're trying to do. And it's a very permissive license. So you can like build a company on top of this. You can make money off top of this. You can like modify it, redistribute it, which is amazing for the ecosystem as a whole. And I'm very happy they're doing this.
Yeah, 100%. It's fantastic. So yes, now moving on to Ollama. I think Ollama is also doing some cool things. So for those that don't know, Ollama is a service that allows you to easily run models on your computer. So all these open source models have kind of complicated ways of getting them installed, and Ollama is kind of a wrapper around a lot of these models that makes the installation, running, and updating process easy. It actually, the developers who created Ollama, they used to work at Docker. So Docker is a similar thing, but as opposed to running LLMs, it allows you to set up development environments to ensure consistency and reliability. So Ollama is that for LLMs. And actually, when Ollama was first introduced, they introduced it at our meetup. So we have a special place in our hearts for Ollama. But Ollama is doing something in the news because they just announced Ollama Turbo, which is a way that you can um, host your mod, like, so you could, as opposed to hosting the LLM on your computer, you can host it on their computer. So they're basically getting into the cloud, and I applaud it. Some people don't like that, try to make money off this, but they've been doing everything for free. I don't know how they were making money before, so I actually are finding a way to monetize this. So if they can make some money by people using their hardware, I think that is fantastic. And it's only $20 a month, which I think is like a small price to pay for running some of these models, because even if you can run it on your computer, you either need a very high powered like MacBook or something, and it's going to use like almost all your system resources. So good luck trying to do anything else. So $20 a month, that's like what you'd pay for one of these subscriptions. So good job, Ollama. I hope you make tons of money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very hopeful. I love what they do for the developer ecosystem, and the fact that they introed their product at our meetup was like a really cool moment. But I'm curious why someone would use this besides going to OpenAI directly and paying the $20 a month there, or Gemini or any of the other leading research firms. I guess the point that you made is hosting a custom model. If you have like a model that you're fine tuning and you're doing a bunch of things locally, you're testing it, but your machine is not capable of running that model, then that seems like a good use case to offload it somewhere else. And since you're already familiar with Ollama, you're running things locally, maybe like you're running the smaller version, a quantized model, you want to run the full version, maybe then you can use Ollama Turbo.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's other alternatives to Ollama. If you want really fast inference, you could use Cerebras, you could use Samanova, you could use Grok, you could use Google's Vertex, you could use what was it? There's another one, I forget. Anyways, not important, but there are alternatives. But I think that Ollama has a lot of developer goodwill, and I think that as opposed to having vendor lock-in, Ollama will be kind of like agnostic. And I think right now it's only running the OpenAI OSS models, but I believe in the future they should probably be able to run any model. So I guess in theory, you should be able to just easily switch which LLM that you're running, and then just keep one subscription, and then just update to whatever open source model you want. Whether you want to use Google's Gemma, whether you want to use OpenAI, Llama, Mistral, whatever. It should just all work for you using Ollama. And I'm sure that in the future, whatever Ollama supports, you should be able to probably run on Ollama Turbo. I think right now it's only in like a beta or preview mode, so the model selection is limited, but I'm sure that will increase in due time.
Yeah. No, I think they're pretty cool because they make it so easy. They reduce the friction, and anything that reduces friction is fantastic, because this entire space is moving so fast, and to move fast is one of the biggest advantages you can have, and Ollama helps you do that. Moving on to the other end of the spectrum, closed sourced, big models, is Gemini. So I think deep research was a feature that's been out for about a year or so. I think all of the LLMs have it, where you can ask it a complex query. Any of these LLMs will go out, do a bunch of searches on the order of 50 plus search queries, get tons of articles from that search query, dive down into each of these different search results, do a bunch of analyses, aggregate that into like a massive, maybe like 20-page report or something. So this has been a trend where companies are leading to inference time compute. So this is in contrast to the pre-training, where you spend a lot of compute, you train the model with all the data on the internet and a lot of proprietary training data, which costs a lot of money once, and then you serve the model for pretty cheap, a couple cents for millions of tokens, I believe, as opposed to this, which costs a lot per query, because each query is going to cost on the order of a few dollars as opposed to a few cents. Sometimes tens of dollars, sometimes a couple hundred, if not thousands of dollars in like the research side, where they try to solve really, really challenging, complicated problems like the ArcAGI test. So this is on that other end, where they spend a lot of money on the inference time when you're making the request. And Google's called it DeepThink. Grok from Elon's XAI calls it heavy, like Grok 4 heavy. And I think OpenAI calls it high, like O3 mini or O3 high, O4 high, high compute.
Although isn't O3 also a thinking model? Or actually,
Yeah.
how is there a difference between deep think and just thinking? Because I thought
Correct.
Gemini already had a thinking model, so I'm struggling to understand how this is different. Is it just thinking longer?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is just do more thinking. Claude's version is called extended thinking, I believe. There's like a little toggle that you can do to just think for much longer, and it costs a lot more. And Anthropic actually released a cool paper, which if I can find it later, maybe I can screen share. But this is in the vein of the inference time compute, where it does a lot of thinking and is able to solve really hard, challenging problems. This scored a gold medal in the International Mathematical Olympiad, which is a very hard competition. It takes hours to reason, hours, not on the order of seconds, as most of these models do, like ChatGPT's vanilla version. But this takes, it thinks for hours. And I think that kind of makes sense, because if you ask a researcher, whatever field they're working in, to solve a hard problem in their domain, they're not just going to think for a couple seconds and boom, hey, here's the answer. They're going to sit down, do a lot of research, reflect on what they saw, do some thinking, do some extrapolation, maybe like run through a couple of hypotheses, and it might take them days, weeks, and then they consolidate all of that information to give you an answer. So this is similar to what this does. And again, just to clarify, I have no proprietary information about how this model works. Despite working at Google, this is all public information. But a lot of other research firms have explained similarly how they're using multi-agent workflows with a leader agent orchestrating all these little sub-agents to do isolated parts of research on this broader complex problem, and then come back together, consolidate all that information, and then presents the final output to you. So here's a cool output. If you're listening to us via audio, I'm showing a render, a 3D render with just like a web app that Gemini was asked to make with 3 different flavors. The tiniest version with Flash looks like a little, I don't know, Crossy Road, Polygon, very basic mobile app game. The Gemini 2.5 Pro also looks kind of basic, but it has more textures. The biggest, beefiest 2.5 DeepThink has a lot of detail. It makes this render with a lot of complexity, textures, shadows, lots of different layers, colors, just significantly more complexity. And this is like a very visual, intuitive way to understand why more thinking is better. But I think where it really shines is science, math, algorithms, and thinking about really complex problems. So really exciting.
Yeah, this stuff is really cool. My understanding is that any LLM can be made into a reasoning model with just small tweaking. So I anticipate that many other model providers will release something similar. And I think most of them already have. So if you guys are curious a little bit about how that process works, I don't know, I think it was maybe 6 months, a year ago, something like that. We talked about the S1 paper, which talked about how any model can be turned into a reasoning model for not that much money. But thinking about the duration of the thinking, just thinking out loud here, I'm curious if thinking longer will always help, because I found that oftentimes when the model context gets very long, I notice that a lot of these models will struggle with coherence. So if, let's say, you thought for 30 seconds, right? I think that a lot of these models are able to handle maybe 30 seconds of thinking iteration, right? Because the actual amount of tokens that are generated might not be that big, right? But if you're thinking of for hours, you might be generating millions and millions and millions or even billions of tokens. So now you have to find some way of figuring out like what were the good thoughts, I guess, and then putting those together. So I don't know, but my intuition is that it could be that the longer you think, it may not necessarily yield better results, just because I'm curious if the models will lose coherence. Where I would be willing to bet it's probably some sort of like curve, and I don't know if anybody's done like the research on this to figure out like the ideal thinking time based off of like the model size and whatnot. But I would imagine like if you add something and like you think for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, the context won't be too long. You get coherence. You could get the model giving you a good answer. But if you think for a day, 2 days, like, is that too much? Like, are you actually going to get worse results? I actually don't know the answer to that. So if anybody knows, let me know in the comments. But this is something that I would like to know.
Great question. And someone has thought of this. I think a lot of people in production are facing the same issue that you mentioned. And so I'm sharing a report from Anthropic about how they built their multi-agent research system. So similar to deep research, Anthropic has a similar feature where they fan out this request to multiple agents, do a lot of thinking, like Mark mentioned, and come up with tons and tons of tokens that they have to sift through. So a lot of text. This is a great read for anyone interested. You can just Google Anthropic multi-agent research system. Great, informative read, and it's very simple. It's written in simple English because this is a very nascent field that doesn't have a lot of design systems, norms and conventions in place. So people are figuring this out as we speak. But one really interesting thing, or like a couple interesting things that I learned from this document was they had to try a lot of different things, fail, and then iterate. And it's very feasible to do that as an individual. You don't need to be a research firm, and you don't need millions of examples for training data. You don't need tons of compute. You just need very simple heuristics, common sense evals, manual evaluation with your own common sense judgment, and try the use cases that you're trying to solve and see how this multi-agent system performs. Usually what you find, as they've outlined in this research paper, is that just try to get your agents to think like you, and list out what it needs to do step by step and watch it. Because a lot of these thinking agents are able to output their thinking tokens too. Sometimes it's like obfuscated from the end result because most people don't care about the thinking steps. They just want the end result. But if you're developing this, going through the reasoning steps is actually pretty insightful to understand how this works, where it fails, why it's doing well in certain areas. you need to scale your effort to the complexity. Like Mark mentioned, like maybe some tasks don't require days and days of effort. So you need to like adjust accordingly. And they came up with a couple of heuristics. Simple things might need just one agent with like a couple tool calls. And if you're comparing two things, maybe like shopping comparison, two different TVs you're trying to buy, you might need to do 4 different sub agents that each search for the specs for a different TV and 10 to 15 calls each, and so on. And then they talk about tool design and figuring out how the agents can improve itself, and a bunch of different heuristics. But to answer your point, they shared a system diagram and architecture design for how this works. So at the very top, they have an orchestrator, like this lead agent that plans everything, that fires off multiple sub-agents to do individual pieces of work. It has a little piece to store the memory. That's how it deals with an infinitely long context window. It summarizes and keeps the relevant bits. Maybe they do some RAG on it, maybe they don't, maybe they just compress it. And then they have like a citations agent, which is, I assume it's like a fine-tuned agent, fine-tuned LLM, because sometimes companies that build multi-agent workflows, they use different LLMs for different things, because as we keep talking about in this podcast, one LLM is better at a certain task and other one is better at something else: coding, creative writing, tool use, etc. And then they go through a lot of these heuristics that we mentioned, scale the inference time compute depending on the complexity, run some evaluations at the end, and then finally consolidate all the output and present the results. It kind of sounds simple, but it didn't exist about a year ago. This whole agentic world in production is relatively new, and companies are developing design patterns to fit in with this new non-deterministic software paradigm.
Yeah, so that partially answers my question, and I don't know if like the answer is out there, because I guess like what I'm really looking for is some sort of like graph where it would have like on the like x-axis like the number of reasoning steps, and then on the y-axis would be like the actual percentage right, something like that, right? Where I or maybe those x and y axes will be switched, but basically it's like I'm trying to see like is there like diminishing returns where like, all right, one reasoning step is good, 5 is better, 10 is even better, but 500 is like worse than 10, you know? And I don't know if that exists. Maybe it exists, but I like that's what I'm looking for, because my intuition is that the more reasoning you have, it's not necessarily better, just because like the architecture that you showed, where you have memory and you have a lot of these reasoning steps, like, you know, you can only summarize so much, right? So like if I have let's say 1 page that I summarized, right? Like I can have a pretty good summary, right? But if I'm summarizing 1,000,000 pages, well, you're going to lose a lot of nuance in that summarization. Therefore, like your orchestrator is going to lose a lot of context and potentially get a worse response than if you would have just dealt with like less reasoning steps. So maybe like just my intuition would be like, maybe we should be asking easier questions, and then combining the easier questions together into something harder. And maybe that's what they do. But like, I think that sometimes like just having too many tokens might not necessarily be better. But anyways, I don't want to belabor this point anymore, but it's just a kind of open question that I have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could talk about this for hours, I think. I was reading a lot about how to orchestrate agents, because I've been trying to do something similar at work lately. But just to like quickly close the loop on this, I think it depends. It depends on the complexity of the problem that you're giving the LLM. The greater the complexity, I think the more thinking you need. The simpler the complexity, if it's just, retrieving some fact, then you don't need any thinking. You just like one shot, get the answer. So I don't know. I think it depends.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. So if you guys know the answer to this in the comments, let us know. But want to talk about the new Gemini, or what's it called? Like the new world model from Google. Because Shashank, you know a bit about that, right?
A little bit. Again, I have no proprietary knowledge. I only know what they've announced in public, but it is a really, really cool announcement. This is like one of those announcements like Sora, where they showed like video after years of not having video. We only had text for a little while. I mean, we had images for a little while. Then we started getting text. Then we started getting audio. Then it was like, boom, video. People were really excited. Now we have steerable video, or I don't know. It's like I'm still unclear of what this is internally, but what it is externally, like when you use it, is a steerable environment where you have a bunch of keys where you can go forward, backward, left, right, pan, and control a character in a 3D environment of like arbitrary scale and complexity. They show lots of examples of like a bird flying through this majestic alpine scenery over a lake, or this guy skydiving through some mountains, or a man walking through a fantasy sci-fi world where like things are just floating in the middle of the air and a waterfall is coming middle of nowhere, and you can control these characters. You can move forward, you can go in and out, and it all updates in real time. And the cool thing is, it's not like the Will Smith eating spaghetti of 3 years ago type video. It's very consistent, very coherent, and has emergent properties of a game engine, where it understands physics. It has object permanence, like all these things that we learn as little kids. This world model has learned somehow without explicitly trying to train this model to do it. And it's just like, wow, mind blowing. One of the other, sorry, go ahead, Mark. You're gonna say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to put it simply, basically this new model is an AI that essentially generates a video game in real time. It's a simulation, and as opposed to, it's like just the next step forward, right? So we had AI that could generate text, we had AI that could generate images, we had AI that could generate video, and now we have AI that can generate whole 3D worlds that are interactable. Now, in my mind, I think that this is amazing. I don't know exactly who this is for, because I don't know. It feels to me very far away from building an entire video game. And it also seems like a lot of overkill to be running a complete LLM and trying to keep state, or sorry, trying to generate a complete video game in real time and trying to keep state of the world. I think I remember when we were reading the announcement, it said it could only hold a couple of minutes of gameplay. So, like, a lot of video games might be, people play them for thousands and thousands of hours sometimes, right? So the fact that this can only generate a couple of minutes of gameplay, it feels like overkill. And I think that like people generating video games will probably continue to use the game engine. But I do think that this is really exciting that this is even possible. So like I really don't know who this is for, but I'm really glad that somebody made it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that feature where you have a real-time game being rendered for you that you can fully customize. It's like lucid dreaming. You're like living this dream reality that you can fully control and do whatever you want. And I did some back of the napkin math for I mean, you mentioned people can play a video game for thousands of hours, and you're absolutely right. But thinking about a simple game with like a story-driven arc that lasts for maybe like 100 hours on the low end, it would cost you like a $250,000 to play, if not like $500,000 to generate all of that based on the cost of like the latest video generation models, as opposed to a video game which will cost like $50. So that is 4 orders of magnitude. That's like 10,000 times more expensive compared to just buying a video game. And it's just like, I don't know, you can, if you're debating spending some money on buying a video game, maybe you can use this as an excuse or a rationalization. But to answer your question, this is really to create more training data, to build simulated environments, to train other agents to understand how to navigate in the real world for robotics, for self-driving, and anything else that needs a lot of training data in very esoteric scenarios that's hard to come by. And I think we had this discussion a couple podcasts ago, maybe like 2 months ago or so, where there was a researcher from Berkeley that was complaining about just this problem. She was at Google trying to do research, and they had such a hard time collecting training data because they were like, oh, we have this regulation, that regulation. Oh, we can't take out the robot in public because it's NDA. We don't want to tell the world what we're working about, what we're working on. That's one of the reasons she went into academia, I think, or like open source, to get outside of these constraints of a big corporation. But like this is another step where you're creating synthetic data for very unique edge cases to build, real world agents.
Yeah, and I think that is fantastic, that they can use this, just prompt and then create something. Because if this can be scaled efficiently, and I have no idea how much compute this actually needs, I imagine it's quite a bit, but if they can do this where you can potentially have an LLM go and programmatically create training data and then use that to continue scaling, this type of thing could be used to train robots. And a lot of these demo videos are kind of fantastical video game like things, but who's to say this couldn't be somebody doing the dishes or doing the laundry or gardening or sorting boxes in a warehouse, right? Like driving a car. All of these things are possible to potentially simulate this. And also, I think that I'm going to go back on what I said, where I said 3 minutes is not nearly enough. But for a lot of tasks, 3 minutes is plenty, right? So, for example, if you are trying to train putting away one singular dish, if it takes you 3 minutes to put away a dish, I want to live in your house, because you probably live in some sort of mansion that's like ridiculous. But yeah, it should not ever take that long to fold a single shirt or put away a box or something like that. And I think those types of individual actions could be used to train robots and give us our really cool robot future. So this feels like a step in that direction of abundance, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, exciting times. And it kind of makes you think out of the box about what this new world presents. What else can we generate? Is this even generation or more of an interaction paradigm? Yeah, really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the topics we had for today. Shashank, is there anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think there were a lot of coding agents that came out. I'm very interested in this space because I'm working on coding agents, design agents, A lot of cool announcements, but something I did want to share is working on a side project, because Mark has also been working on a side project, and I built this little app to go through all of my text messages. I created a backup, threw it on my computer, go through all of my messages and analyze the conversations I've been having. And it's actually pretty cool. I was annoyed that no one has released this kind of a tool yet. And I was like, why can't I just vibe code this in a couple hours? And that's what I did. It was really easy. I used Cursor. I have the paid version. But I looked at some of the billing and analytics, and I burned through $18 worth of credits in about a day, or like 2 days worth of coding the whole day. This was over the weekend, and built a fully functioning web app with really complex UI that looks like a messaging app with conversations on the left, with a thread with timestamps, with like a speaker handles, and a chat window on the right where you can talk to it about all the conversations that you're having. Handle like memory issues, because I'm giving it like my chat history for the last, I don't know, like 10, 15 years or something, however long my backup goes. And it's just really exciting to be in this new paradigm of software where to go from 0 to 1 is so easy. And it's an exciting new world.
Have you learned anything as like a takeaway from this? Like any way that you would send text differently, or I don't know, like what's your kind of your takeaway from this?
Yeah, that's a good point. I learned how to work with the model. And I think you can think about it as hiring an intern to do your job. And you are learning all the eccentricities of this intern, trying to understand what they're good at, what they're not good at. And I think you can find really good heuristics, docs, guidelines about how to prompt these models. But on a high level, keep the ask very specific. Even though these tools have some agentic capability and can carry out complex functionality, like complex is pretty limited when it comes to comparing it to a human being. So keep your asks really simple. Keep it narrowly scoped to a specific part of the app. Try to keep like the specs, like the specifications for different sections of your application. So Amazon released this tool. I don't know if you ever heard about it when you were at Amazon, but they released Kiro, which is trying to usher in this new paradigm of spec-driven development. They're trying to focus on the architecture and the design of the software and place a lot of emphasis on that. And the code generation comes second, because if you nail this part, then regardless of which LLM you use to generate the code, if the specification is very detailed, then the implementation shouldn't be that challenging.
Yeah, so Amazon is actually for reference, I worked at Amazon for a little over 4 years, so I'm very familiar with Amazon's culture. And
just
Amazon
enough time to vest all of their stock.
So and now I'm living, and I'm actually doing this podcast from the back of my car, which I'm living in at the moment. So that shows you how much stock I was actually truly able to vest. So anyways, but it's mostly because we're road tripping around Canada right now. So we're trying to go all the way up to Tuktoyaktuk, which is as far north as you can. Well, actually, it's not as far north as you can drive in North America, but it is the only road that you can drive in your own car to the Arctic Ocean. So there actually is another road in Alaska, off the Dalton Highway in Alaska, but it ends in an oil field, and you actually can't go to the Arctic Ocean. You have to take a tour from this. I think the town is called Dead Horse there to get to the Arctic Ocean. But this town in Tuktoyaktuk, which is in the Northwest Territory in Canada, you can drive your car right up to the Arctic Ocean. Anyways, so that's why I'm in the car. But with that being said, Amazon puts a lot of emphasis on both doc writing and also architecture. So I spent a pretty considerable amount of time when I was at Amazon, spending time like either writing docs or reviewing docs. And I think like in the 4 years, I ended up writing it because I remember when I left, I compiled all the documents that I wrote together, and I think I wrote around 500 or so different documents over the 4 years.
Way. Oh my god, that is insanity.
I wrote a lot. Now, to be fair, I probably wrote more than the average Amazonian, but yeah, I wrote a lot. And some docs were, pretty involved. Some were just like a short thing, but like what they would do at Amazon is oftentimes when you had a meeting, you'd bring a doc, and then everybody would go and sit down, read the doc, and the doc would have to explain the entire architecture. And if it didn't, people would have a ton of questions about the architecture. And if you wrote the doc really, really well, people would start maybe asking clarifying questions or whatever, or like getting to like the meat of the debate or the heart of what you wanted. And that was like a skill that took a long time to be able to get a doc with the appropriate architecture that you could articulate your problem fully in writing. And I truly believe that writing is thinking. And if you can
articulate... a good New York Times article about that, I think.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thinking. But it really is though. So like for me, I tend to talk out my problems a lot. So if I have an issue, like sometimes I'll maybe talk to Shashank, on the podcast, or I'll talk to other friends or whatever, and I'll kind of work through the problem, because I'm not a very good internal thinker, but I'm kind of an external thinker where if I have a problem, I like to just kind of spitball a bunch of ideas with people, even if like it's a bad idea. That's just me. But I found that when I sit down and write out my thoughts, it serves as a similar purpose. So I think that is what Amazon's trying to do, is they're trying to get people really, really clear in their thinking. They actually have a few different internal tools that are used to create architecture diagrams and make sure you think through the architecture from all different angles. Like, is this scalable? Does it have security? They want to make sure that the software that's written is really, really good. So I totally understand why they're building this. And since I don't work there anymore, I don't know how it is. I haven't tried the software, but I think that this really aligns with Amazon's culture.
You should try for your side project.
Yeah,
I've heard good things. I haven't used it myself, but I'm curious for your side projects that you're coding in the backseat of your car, your SUV, with a Starlink satellite. How many docs have you written?
Only one.
Okay.
So yeah, I have actually, well, two-ish, but one main one. So I have a document that I have extremely detailed, not architecture. The architecture I'm leaving mostly up to the LLM, because a lot of this is, I don't want to have to like actually sit down and program the whole thing, because using these large language models is far more efficient.
My God, you went from 500 docs to letting the LLM just vibe code the whole thing for you. My God.
I know, really, I'm fully embracing this technology. But yeah, so I have one hyper detailed doc, which has some architecture, but I think that the architecture that I have is fairly simple. And I'm breaking down the projects that I'm working on into different modules. So I guess one takeaway for the listeners, because maybe not that interesting for you guys about what I'm talking about now, but one thing that I found was pretty useful is in the projects that I'm working on, which I don't want to talk about yet, but in due time, I will talk about it on the podcast. It should be pretty cool, but it's not ready yet. But the thing that I learned is that in the project, I'm trying to make it so that the LLM can give me reproducible and consistent output based off of a somewhat like a varying input. So like, for example, like this isn't it, but let's say you wanted to have the LLM call an API, right? So maybe the LLM needs to give you specific JSON code or needs to write code that interacts with other code and compiles, right? So that needs to be consistent output. And what I found is oftentimes the LLM would give me code that was almost correct, but was maybe not compiling. So for example, if it had a JSON output, the output would be slightly off, right? Like maybe you would have a bracket that didn't line up, or capitalization where capitalization wasn't needed, or maybe it would try to correct some spelling that shouldn't have been corrected because originally the JSON key was one thing and then the output was another thing. So what I did, which actually was really useful, is whenever the LLM gave me an incorrect result, what I would do is I would say, in the same conversation, I would say, hey, this is incorrect, right? Like you gave me an uppercase letter when it should have been lowercase. Why did you do that? Like, and how can I tweak my prompt so that you won't make this mistake going forward? And I found that the LLM oftentimes gave me really, really helpful advice to tweaking the prompt so that it didn't make that mistake going forward. Now, it's not perfect, right? The LLM still sometimes would make mistakes, but this is, I've found that LLMs are really, really good at prompting themselves. So that was my takeaway, is I'm not a very good prompter, but LLMs are pretty good prompters. And you could go and fine tune a model that gives you the output that you want, but fine tuning is a big pain. And then you're stuck with one model, but it's far, far easier if you can get a really good prompt, because if I fine tune a model, I have to use that model. If I fine tune a prompt, I can use that prompt on any LLM, and as the LLMs get better, they'll probably get better and better at understanding that prompt. So that was my takeaway.
Yeah, that's an awesome takeaway. You should read that article that I sent. And they talk a lot about the same thing that you mentioned, trying to get the LLM to correct itself and working with small sample sizes. You don't need a whole evaluation pipeline. You just look at one wrong thing and say, hey, how do I do this better? And then tweak the prompt. And it's funny how we've come, in the last few years, with like prompt engineering being this whole new buzzword, people thinking they're going to lose their jobs to prompt engineers, and a few months later, prompt engineering being looked down upon, and hardcore engineers thinking that, oh yeah, you need to fine tune models. And then people are like, this is fine tuning is like ridiculous. It's like way too much effort for not as much improvement, and it's not worth doing. Just like figure out the system prompt, and that's essentially what prompt engineering is. Figure out what a really good prompt is. And I was listening to a really good podcast from an open source terminal app provider, Open Code, I want to say. Yeah, I think it's called Open Code, powerful AI coding agent built for the terminal. And they talked about the same thing. Focus on building the product. Don't really focus on like all these minor optimizations with LLMs, fine tuning, or building your own model from scratch, God forbid. But just focus on the product. Try to steal good prompts from other people. You can ask a lot of these public companies, really good frontier labs, to the Claude Anthropic models or OpenAI's models. Just ask them to share their system prompts, and oftentimes you might be able to get it and see how they work so well, how they're doing the thing that you want to be doing really well. Reverse engineer other people's prompts that are working and tweak it one at a time. And I think that works really well.
Yeah. So if you're trying to do this, if you're trying to get a really solid prompt, basically the guide is I would say, use those prompts as inspiration, but then just write your own, and then figure out what it got wrong, and then ask it how to correct it. And then the LLM will give you a better prompt, and then iterate as many times as required. So for example, for me, I did about 10 iterations, and I was able to get a really solid prompt just by asking the LLM differently. But for you, maybe more is required, maybe less. But I think eventually, if you do this, it's going to be less than you think. You're going to be able to get a really, really solid prompt to get the LLM responding the way you want.
Oh, and check out Anthropic's cookbook. It's a bunch of prompts that they've shared for their research agent, their orchestration lead, and the citation agent. And you might get a lot of ideas about how to structure your system prompt. But I think we've covered a lot, and maybe we can end it here. Thanks again for listening. Mark, do you have any parting words?
No, but guys, thank you for listening. And also, nobody asked any questions on our YouTube channel. So if you want to ask something, Shashank and I will try to answer it. So leave a comment, ask a question, happy to answer it. So if you're listening, let us know that you exist, and ask some questions, because we would love to answer them. So anything you want to know, we'll try to help. And that's it. So thanks for listening. Catch you in the next one.